based on my understanding, we're likely to be in agreement about a lot of things. Um, I obviously take a very disagreeable point of view, and I am committed to it. But
Yeah,
it doesn't seem like a lot of alternative. At least logically speaking.
well, that's me. It's like I find that I'm very much logic really plays a very large part in how I process things.
Hmm.
And I see the Torah as very logical, as having great benefit for humanity, as not something that's done away with, and something that, how could I categorize it? I see it as a national constitution.
Hmm.
Daniel Elazar a few years back had the Jerusalem Center for Public Policy. He was actually one of Ronald Reagan's advisors. And
Hmm.
even though he died in 99, his website is still up. And he has a great article on Deuteronomy as constitution.
Hmm.
And
Well, I mean, that's actually what foundationally the first set of civil code was based on. Not
yes,
to mention that is actually the entire purpose of America. I mean, you have people branching out from the Catholic Church to have religious freedom, and they're not bringing gold with them; they're bringing Bibles. And you have 60 families who start a nation and actually even establish the Sabbath. And these are all non-Hebrew speaking individuals, which means that even from the translation point of view, that people can run with it and take it as it stands and create the most flourishing nation on earth.
well, exactly. It's a blueprint for all nations. I'm
Of course.
to say that it's just an Israelite thing, and I know I get on a lot of heated debates because I hold that the Shabbat is universal for everyone. We all need a day
Oh,
off.
of course.
And even though it's a
Well,
sign of Israel's covenant, it's often overlooked the fact that when in the text it says it's for your bondservant. And as you know, those would not have been Hebrews, that would have been people from other nations. So God is very much concerned with everybody, especially
mhm.
those that are
Well,
indentured.
he says to keep the Sabbath because he created the earth in 7 days and he rested on the seventh day. So all monotheistic religions should be able to unite under the foundation that there's one God, and if the God created the earth in the 7 days and we're doing it simply to sanctify it like he did, then we're just increasing our godliness on this earth and we're being holy as opposed to a more natural uh, set of chaos, which is to be evil, like it says in Genesis again. We're evil since the days of our youth. And so we have seen history play out, and mankind has an inclination to do bad and evil. And it's the greatest exercise of free will to do good.
Amen. Yeah. Like who can
Actually,
argue with
and just,
that?
yeah. Well, like I said, I think we're very much on the same page, but just to get an idea of yourself and how we were even put into contact. I'm just going to be completely, I don't mind describing my story and how I came to my conclusions, but I want to hear a bit about yourself first. I'm hopping on this simply because Israel did a podcast with you and he said he went, well, I was willing to do it just to have a pleasant conversation. To me, if there are more like-minded Jews or non-Jews, this is good for the whole world. And so I don't even know where you take place in terms of are you Jewish? Are you not? Are you Catholic? And so I just kind of want to know
Sure.
your background.
Sure. So I was raised Seventh-day Adventist, so in a Judeo-Christian home because I've always kept the Sabbath, even since childhood, always kept kashrut, the biblical kashrut, not the rabbinic
Hmm.
kashrut. And then I started studying in the 90s, went through my messianic phase. And then as I kept studying, I found more issues with the New Testament. So now we describe ourselves as Tanakh only. So we hold to Torah, Tanakh, and it's a journey. But I did write when I had a crisis of faith in '99. So I
Hmm.
delved into deep research. I was researching probably about 18 to 20 hours a day just constantly at the library. We didn't have the internet back then. Yes, there was a point in time where you researched without the internet. And so it was a very, very laborious and very intense type of study. But for me, it came down to, if there is a God, if he has revealed himself, then he likely has standards. And when I look through, especially say Psalms 119, I see this extolling of the precepts of Yahweh, of the Torah, of truth, and Yahweh
Mm,
being a God of truth. And that very much resonates with me. So if
mm.
we tend to create this humanistic God where it's defined, human up. Well, I see it being more God down. He's revealed himself to us, and it's up to us to get in line with that rather than trying to make him get in line with what we think he should be.
Oh, for sure. That is the typical insertion to where God's supposed to fulfill what we want, and his rules are really like, oh, if I were God, then I would do it like this. And ultimately, we're fortunate we even have enough literature to gain an understanding of God because he isn't exactly clear cut. It's not that simple. Life is not easy. Life is not simple, and we're so fortunate to have this guidance. And for me uh, all of it comes my conclusion to all of this really has come from the fact that growing up Orthodox, um, you are not taught the reasonings to do anything, and I think that's common in children in general. In most education systems, certainly of my generation, you're just following the masses and doing what they're supposed to do, whether it's getting vaccinations, or going on the football team, having a locker, and you're going to feel guilty and separated if you're not participating with the group. And fortunately, my parents actually cared for me, and they're actually still together, and they've been up and down with their beliefs, and they have lived two different portions of life. So I have a bit of a unique upbringing in that regard, and I had to kind of evaluate all of these things at a point in my life where I needed to know what direction I'm going into. Like, am I going to be maintaining these values? Like, I really wanted to be Orthodox. That's the thing. I really did. I grew up in an Orthodox structure. I have an older brother who has been a mentor for me and has taught me like the majority of my skills. And he grew up Orthodox, but he's like a super Orthodox guy. He's like literally a bodybuilder. So just to get an idea of like not the typical Orthodox guy.
No, no.
And he well he's had that as a foundation, and I've seen his life flourish. So I figured I would just kind of go in that direction. But at a certain point, you're pressed with like, if I'm going to follow this, I am ultimately living a lie, because uh, in the initial stages of figuring out all of this literature, I mean, you have halacha, the Gemara, the Mishnah. You have to go to yeshiva. You have to sit in shul and or school from 6 in the morning till 10 p.m. at night. The last thing on earth you're doing is living. Okay, but let's just say that you decided to follow with this curriculum. Um, I just never knew the law, and somebody told me like, what makes you Jewish is following the decrees and the ordinances of God. And I was encouraged to read the five books of Moses because I knew that that's where the law was, and I had like glossed over it. And that's the disaster. How did an Orthodox religious Jew just gloss over the five books of Moses when that is where all of the understanding comes from? Even if it were by their standard confusing and it doesn't make much sense, it's still the foundational literature. So it would be like learning theory on piano before you start playing like intense Mozart. It's like your foundational stuff, right? And well, when I read the foundational material, I realized how much had been added on top of that and how difficult of a task it is. Unfortunately, I think I got cut out from the. I hope it didn't connect to somebody's phone. You know how it is with these things. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect.
Do I
Um,
have sound?
yes, yes. Um, well, you see, the foundational literature is everything, and I found my life to be oppressed from all of these additions and subtractions, that the name that is being oppressed on top of me is actually God and God's wrath, right? And this is very common in Catholic and Christian and Jewish and Muslim homes, and the blanket is religion. And so when you're looking at religion, the Jewish history is very, very significant. And I think this is actually the tell all to why I stuck to it, which was it would seem crazy for me to disregard the importance of the Jewish nation to the world. To my horror, I was educated in Jewish history through reading about brilliant historians like Paul Johnson and the Tanakh and all the literatures in between the five books and now. And the Jewish people have done a terrible job at following God's commandments. When the entire point, I actually wrote a book called the Children of Israel, where I compiled all the tactical commandments that we could follow. It's like
Send me a link to that.
yeah,
I'm very interested.
absolutely. It's very simple. I wrote like my own opening dialogue as to why I would want to do it. And then all I did was put like purpose and mission. And you basically see over and over again experts from all over the place follow my decrees and my ordinances, follow my decrees and my ordinances, follow my
Yes.
decrees and my ordinances, and don't add to the right or to the left, follow them just like they're here. And that is actually probably the longest chapter in that book for compiled. Of course, I do for murder and the Ten Commandments. I find that to be the 10 most integral laws in the five books. And the Orthodox Jews don't even know the Ten Commandments. You know, they
Uh,
don't. You know, if you were to ask a yeshiva kid on the street what the Ten Commandments are, you know, and it's like at the end of the day, considering I was willing to reject the whole thing, I want to improve the quality of my life, not to decrease the quality of my life. And if God promises blessing, how come over the past at least 2,000 years has there been just devastating Jewish history? You know, and to me, it sounds like an oversimplification to other people, but it seems pretty simple to me. We haven't been following God's laws,
well,
and it
you
it,
know,
it lines up perfectly.
that is exactly what I come away with. That is
Hmm.
100% what I come away with. And I see I see direct cause and effect. When I had my crisis of faith, one of the first things that I had to do was see if the law was good, to see if it was valid in any way. Are these just laws created by fiat because A, God wants you to stand out and be different? Or is there any justification for them? Is there application? So one of the first things I began looking at was kashrut, the meats that we are told to avoid. There was a study by David Mott of the UK. This was back in the 1980s. He did the toxicity of meat. In every single instance, your unclean meats had higher rates of toxins, higher rates of parasites, and a whole bunch of other factors that make it not even considered food for human consumption. The other thing
Hmm.
that you find is that usually the foods that we are allowed to eat come from, they are vegetarian, so their primary source is going to be grass and um, pasture. The other thing that I began to look at was the regulations, say for circumcision. There was back in 2012, 2013, there was a study. It had over 100,000 participants. It was on 7 continents. It was every race, religion, it didn't matter your ethnicity. It was just people. And men who were circumcised had better health. They had lower rates of STDs, lower rates of HVP, lower rates of penile cancers, and then their female partners had lower rates of ovarian and cervical cancers. So I began to see this pattern over and over again.
Well, you know, we live in such an interesting day and age now with all these statistics, and you know, you can go on the internet and you can find the exact opposite for these sort of things. And that's what's so rough about the whole thing. To just support your point of view and tell you where we come to the same conclusion, yet we have two different ways of looking at it. You see, for me, when it comes to the kosher food, first of all, the hierarchy of things that are important, kosher is not anywhere near that important. There's actually no punishment for it. And so it's simply unclean. So it's almost like a suggestion from God. If you really want to be holy and clean, this is what you got to be doing. And it's specified specifically for people who want to be part of the holy people, right? Like that is actually the what the Jews are supposed to be. And the rest of the world has been able to pick up on that. And now everybody can be holy and everybody can be good. I mean, that's actually like best case scenario, because then the holy nation doesn't have to be an outsider, and I do see validity in the New Testament, but instead of sidetracking, I'll bring it back to the laws of kosher and circumcision. I had a conversation because I have a boxing gym and I teach Torah to people who are in addiction and incarceration, homelessness, to young children as well. And I have an opportunity to teach Torah or just read the 5 books to the 11-year-old son of one of my boxing coaches. And he had never heard about circumcision, and I was reading the expert from Genesis chapter 17, verse line 9, where it says that uh, if you need to be circumcised or you're invalidating my covenant, right? And I thought he wouldn't be able to get it, but I really hoped he would. And the good news is he nailed it. And I said, after you understand what circumcision is, and this is where it originates from, why is it that people would get circumcised? And he just sat there for a moment and he was thinking, and he said, well, I guess they want to be closer to the covenant between God and Abraham, right? And that was his first time hearing it. Now, I was amazed. That obviously shows, I think, his intellect as well. But this is an 11-year-old child, where ultimately you're going to have less promiscuity when people are circumcising themselves to be closer to the covenant of God, right? Which gets them closer to the laws, right? And it instantly teaches them to inquire about why that was even done to them, because I would say from a health perspective, that is the last thing on earth that we should be doing. Like God put us on this earth and made us as males born uncircumcised. So I would say that it would be healthy and good. And I don't like to really insert those narratives, though perhaps it's true that it does have some additional benefits. But you see, the biggest benefit is that it brings us closer to the covenant between God and man.
Right. Yeah, it definitely does. One of the things that God says is if we don't walk in his ways, we don't obey his law, that he will not hear our prayers. So how are we going to be close to him? The Deuteronomy 4:6-8, where, what nation on earth is so close to me and has such righteous and just laws as the laws I'm giving you this day. So if we don't follow it, if we don't live by it, we're never going to have that blessing.
Mhm.
So many of the blessings that God says, and that closeness of relationship is there at the top of the list. But I find that the law is self-fulfilling. So through, in English it says, Abraham will walk in my ways that I may bless him. So there's very much this causative relationship between what God says will happen, obeying the law that generates it, that produces those results, and then receiving the benefit of those results. And then
Mhm.
conversely, if you don't walk in it, you don't follow it, well, then you're going to have hardship. Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28 lay that out. It's like, well, there's a lot of hardship here. There's disease of long continuance, there's wars, you will have children, you won't enjoy them. There's so many things there, and we see it
Mhm.
being played out in world history. But if we want that
Mhm.
closeness with God, Isaiah says, the waters of Shiloh that go softly. If we want that gentle relationship, um, God has told us how to do it. He's packaged it up in the form of a law, and he said, "Here, this is the complete package. Just do it." And
Mhm.
we struggle with that because we really want to do our own way, and I think a lot of that is trying to put ourselves in God's stead and say, "Nah, God, you didn't get it right, God. We know better." And
Mhm.
it takes a lot of self-control to say, okay, I may not always understand why God said this, but I'm going to do it. And then much of the time that understanding does come as you do it.
Absolutely. And that's just like anything, I can create a parallel from my own field of work that's been providing for me, at least as a young man or even as a young teenager, the fitness world, and like you don't understand necessarily like where the bicep inserts and where it originates from and the origin point and all the other fibers in between, or necessarily what's the function of the bicep, which is reflection, for example. Uh, but if you keep doing curls over and over and over again for years at a time, then your arms grow, and if you add nutrition and right nutrition to it, then you're going to be able to grow in a faster period of time. And this works for everything in life is you have to trust the process that already exists prior to you trying it. And
Absolutely.
so God's law is just that, it's existed prior to us. And if you wanted to look at it on a grand scale, at least from the narrative of the story, there were individuals who did not have the literature, who followed this way of being and got so close to God, they were able to talk to him, even receive promises from him. These promises were fulfilled. And I'm part of the nation of the people that unfortunately tend to mock it all up like it's not really that true and we know better than God. But the history stands and the people stand, despite an unrealistic adversity, which I would directly correlate to us not following the law. And it really is pretty simple to clean up, like we're not too far away. Like, we have enough brilliant minds and people who could get together and make it work, and the American story is really the most refreshing one to me. Because back to what you were saying, where God promises certain outcomes, right? God says in Deuteronomy that if you're going to follow my law as it is written and not adding to the right or to the left of it, the land in which you dwell in will be giving its fruits to you and it will be a great success. That land at that particular period of time was discussing Israel, but the people took that same book and they went to the United States and they made it a success over there, and that promise was fulfilled.
Absolutely. I say over and over again that it is following those values and principles and laws within the Tanakh, and specifically the Torah, that has made America strong. And at the same time, now we're seeing a fracture in America. We're seeing a lot of division, a lot of chaos, because
Mhm.
those traditional values that we held on to for 300 years are now beginning to fall apart. This new generation, it says that Israel over and over again, Israel worshiped gods that they knew not, neither had their fathers known. It's kind of like this new movement, this new generation that
Mhm.
all of a sudden comes up with all these grand ideas on their own, and it departs from a way of life that works. And that's where we are now. But when you look at American history, there was so much cohesion in society. It wasn't like today. You could go to different churches, say 150 years ago, and you would still find basically the same ideas being taught in every church, because they
Mhm.
very much relied on the Ten Commandments. They very much relied on what the Bible stated. So they were very textual oriented. In Christianity, it's called the sola scriptura, where the biblical text is supposed to determine what your interpretation is, rather than having an interpretation that then you're trying to make fit on that biblical text. And when
Mhm.
we look at America's history, the ideas of justice, presumed innocence, the idea of course, murder and theft being wrong, all of these things have made America adhering to it, because you have a lot of nations that will give lip service to um, to these ideas, but they don't really follow through. And for a time, America was a nation that followed through with it. and you have a nation of liberty where everybody from every country wants to immigrate to the United States so they can enjoy the liberty, they can enjoy the prosperity. And but it's not because America did it on her own. It's because she followed a plan that was engraved, within the words of the Ten Commandments and within the greater Torah, that that the nation was blessed, and any nation, and this is the thing that I find people really struggle with, is that it is universal. For me, I see the Torah as a natural law where God has taken the laws that govern physics, he's given it to us in a social compact. So
Mhm.
one of the ones that I use is Newton's third law of motion, where you have for every action, there's an opposite and equal
Mhm.
reaction. Well, we have that in Torah as eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. If you have opposite and equal reactions, it keeps things balanced so that crime does not, spiral out of control, because you are countering that crime
Mhm.
with an equal measure. But at the same time, you're not going way above what the crime committed requires to where it becomes oppression. So that balance establishes peace, prevents chaos, and prevents oppression. Um,
Mhm.
that is, I think, what we all desire. And it's definitely what the prophets talk about when it talks about at the point of time when there's a new covenant, that nations will beat their swords into plowshares. Um,
Mhm.
we're definitely not there yet. Uh,
Well, I mean, it's happened in history before. I'm actually glad you made the transition so you can get a bit of understanding of my thoughts of the Tanakh and the five books. The five books need to be read virtually by everybody. And there's an interesting observation from Carl Jung where he said he couldn't treat people who hadn't read the biblical narrative. And if people had read it, then they were treatable. And this, Carl Jung, the brilliant guy, and he's essentially the father of psychology in a lot of ways, And I don't, he did end up believing in God, but he's had his, rights and lefts with it, and he looks at it within a certain frame. But even he could understand as a clinician that is something that's just a fact, right? And people who don't have an understanding of history and where we come from, who we are, the very, very brick and mortar stuff, it's like it's kind of like missing some motor function to a degree. And that lack of understanding obviously inhibits people's ability to get better, which transitions, I think, very nicely to the fact that I have gotten into the space of helping people in addiction. And in addiction, you have the 12 steps. And the Bible, we have to defend that a lot, but it's not, I don't have to defend the 12 steps a lot, like people like the 12 steps. And it's because it works. And the second step of the 12 steps is to uh, believe in a higher power, that something beyond you is going to take you to a place of recovery. And when you read the chapter from like the small book, because they have the big book and the small book, it says to uh, ultimately these are all suggestions, because we're talking about the one God, even as monotheist, right? We have God, there's only one of him. So perhaps you say Christ and I say Yahweh, but if we follow the law, we're winners, right? And I don't care so much about the semantics on these things. Like you can bring the law back into the education system. You can at least offer it to people as a suggestion, and it's been removed as a suggestion, and now it just simply doesn't exist. So is the Bible closer to a suggestion, or is it closer to like a really, really good conclusion and an amazing piece of literature to enhance people's lives? And that's how I like to provide it to people, because I wear my tzitzit, I follow all the laws. I even have my own understanding of the Shavuot holiday. And the holidays are one of those things where God very clearly says in Isaiah that, you know, you guys think I actually care about your fast and your holidays? Like, you do not treat your neighbors well. You guys are stealing from each other, and you're coming to me with your holidays and your festivities. Again, hierarchy. You have the Ten Commandments, You have how you treat your fellow and your neighbor and the laws of justice. And then you're kind of getting into the nitty gritties of like, oh, how can I raise my spirituality? Eat kosher, right? And from the religious frame, I live in Los Angeles, California,
Right.
and almost uh, you're either Orthodox or you're not Jewish. And like out of a classroom of 20 students who are going to graduate from an Orthodox school, maybe five are going to walk away Orthodox, right? And so you're just looking at 15 of those students either got screwed up by the society, um, by just being straight evil and rejecting, as an opposition, they reject God entirely because they know what they were growing up in is absolutely wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and reject all the good as well. And those are like the main two ones that end up happening. Or you're like, you know what, I'm just a human being. And sure, I was raised Jewish, and these things are kind of like cute cultural things, in which case, like, yeah, I like to go to shul on Yom Kippur and I wear my white kippah then, but I don't eat kosher. I'm kind of a scummy businessman. I do whatever I like. I have sleep with whoever I want to. And that is like a huge majority issue where like the religious have pretended that we're the ones who control God's law. It's like God's law is there for everybody. And there's actually no authority that can stop you from following these things. So why do you have so much shame and guilt? And it seems to be imbued in our history, like how did the people go from being the kings of a land for 1500 years where the entire world wanted to show up to see this miracle, right? To being rejected from the land, adopting rabbinic Judaism, and then living in a ghetto culture for 1500 years, and so many other worse things, not to mention the worst genocides, one of the worst genocides that's ever happened within 100-year frame from now. Uh, I'm quite disgusted of that history, and I think it comes from that culture where we were meant to be God's holy people, to be an example to the world. And we're definitely not an example. Like, I personally want nothing to do with that. That's why I look at the law and I say the kippah's not there, so I don't wear the kippah. The seat's there, so I wear the kippah. These holidays, I'm in a position to be able to hold them. So I will, right? But if I wasn't in a position to hold the holidays, Shabbat is my focus because that's in the Ten Commandments. Shabbat's way more important. Like, you're going to tell me you're going to go to shul with your white kippah on Yom Kippur, and like whatever, you're religious again, you started keeping kosher, but you don't keep Shabbat. Like, as a Jew, you're a fool, and I am pretty open about these things. I don't have much shame because I've been able to let go of that history. Like, I'm a human being, and if we're going to start changing things moving forward, there needs to be this sort of talk out there.
Amen. This is so refreshing. I mean, this gives us so much hope because it seems like everywhere we look, whether it's Judaism, Christianity, or just people who are just floating along looking for something, it feels like people are waking up. And people are saying there must be more. And this kind of comes to what Jeremiah says is, behold, we've inherited lies from our forefathers. And it seems like a lot of us are feeling that the traditions we've inherited, the belief system we've inherited doesn't match the text. At least that was it for me. It didn't match what was
Mhm.
written in the text. But we're also seeing that it contradicts and it prevents a thriving way of life that benefits you in all aspects. So just hearing you say that, it definitely resonates with me. It's definitely something I can relate to. And
I'm so glad. I was going to ask you, um, what is your end goal with these? I mean, because I don't know so much about your background. This is to me a very off the cuff conversation. Uh, I take it you're part of it, you because you labeled an organization that you're a part of. I want to know just kind of like what's your mission.
so I would say my overall mission is to bring anyone who has a heart back to appreciating the written Torah. Um, a lot of my study, I do comparative ancient Near Eastern studies. So I have found that to be the method that clarifies, when there are questions, it clarifies what's written in Torah better than anything else, when you take it back to its ancient Near Eastern context. So in doing that, I find that the written Torah is a document that can reunite all hearts, all people, into the love of one creator. But after that, even if we all can agree that, hey, we love this one God, we still have enough division where there can be violent conflicts. So, how do we get beyond that? And I find that it is showing that love of the Torah, the vision of Ezekiel in Ezekiel 36, Ezekiel 38, where that Torah is written on our hearts. And it is in my heart to help that further that process and to show people the ultimate love of God and teaching us how to live. I mean, he took the time to write it down, to show Moses, this is what you need to do to have a healthy, vibrant life where you're not facing disease, where you're not facing injustice. And so, yeah, it is my mission to hopefully contribute to that process and renew that love of Yahweh, renew that love of Torah, so that all humanity becomes a part of that. And then if that happens, Israel naturally has peace. Because
Mhm.
if everybody's walking in Torah, yeah, I mean, there's so many points of accountability in the Torah that if you're following it, yeah, nations may rise up and hold you accountable, but it's not going to be egregious like the visceral reactions that we have seen, over the past 2,000 years to when, a people go astray and they depart from the law. The reactions can be a lot more gentle, still corrective, but a whole lot more gentle than what we have seen throughout history. So that's my heart. That's my mission.
Mhm.
I am starting an organization. It's called Torah Observant Israel. And I chose that name because it has intention to it. There's so many labels going around out there, but I want something that has, this is what we're committing to, this is what we're upholding, and this is where we find meaning and it furthers our relationship with God. So that's where I'm at.
No, that is amazing, and I'm totally in support of that. Yeah, I mean if there's anything that I could do to be a part of that, sign me up, you know.
Okay, fabulous.
At the
I
end of the
will.
day, that's what it's about, you know, and this is about people and human beings and living harmoniously amongst each other. Uh, that obviously has to be the highest point because we're all God's children, you know, and there's only one God. What does He want from us? And you know, I didn't create the historical narrative, so for the Jews are a part of that, whether you like it or not, good or bad, they're a part of it, whether you like it or not. And for the past 3,500 years, no matter how much they're oppressed and people try to destroy them, they're still there. And that looks close, very, very close to the promise of God is that when you fall against my decrees and ordinances, I will destroy you, but I will not destroy you entirely.
Right.
And so we haven't been entirely destroyed. I really hope that doesn't come again. And we are arising in a time where it could be. And for me, as an American viewing what's going on in my hometown, like, the, you know, we have found a way to do war that is so much better than the old way. You know, you can have people take themselves out. You know, like
Mhm.
that is literally what's going on right now. And the depression and the sadness and these actions that the youth have been taking a part of are so difficult to come out of. It's insane. Like I don't think that there's going to be such an easy turnaround. Perhaps people could start recognizing these foundational issues and start getting together, but there's just too much hurt, you know.
Right.
Uh, People have, even myself included, like just being a part of this lifestyle, being in and out all the time. It's so discouraging. What's funny is I've noticed it as part of the yeshiva system where
Mhm.
It's literally Pleasure Island from Pinocchio, where the uh, evil men who were child trafficking children to turn them into donkeys. You put them in this island and they get whatever they want and as much of it as possible, but ultimately it turns them into donkeys and then they're sold as cattle, right? And in the yeshiva system, you go as a young, handsome, and accomplished young man who's now has no boundaries to anything at all. And Israel is not the cleanest place. You know, it's just one of the top uh, places for homosexuality in the world, actually, particularly in Tel Aviv. They don't follow God's law there, so you have all these kids in these like dirty yeshivas that end up partying every single night and hooking up with prostitutes and doing drugs and uh, all the above, and they get burnt by that because that actually has an effect to the human mind, body, and soul. And the only alternative left at that point in the burning is, you know what, the rabbis were right, and the yeshiva system is for me. And so you have these broken people who end up clinging again to the wrong thing, and they are just that cattle sold in the sort of Pinocchio metaphor, if you wanted to take it like that. Now, I'm talking about it from the frame of which I've seen it. Foundationally speaking, the whole point of the Torah is to live. So the whole idea that people are learning dogmatic literature from 6 in the morning till 10 p.m. at night uh, is the exact opposite of living. And these great rabbis that everybody's actually busy worshiping are people who have done nothing with their life except read in a dark tunnel with their like payout tied to the ceiling so they wouldn't fall to sleep. Like I don't know of a worse example other than what they actually provide to you is, oh, this is the pinnacle of holiness and this is the pinnacle of goodness. And so everything's in confusion. If the Jews are confused, then I can definitely see everybody else being confused because we're the ones who were given this amazing piece of literature thousands of years ago before the rest of the world had it. Now that the rest of the world has it, that is obviously God's message to mankind. Get together, people. You can all do this together. And these religious structures are not it. My law is it. And I want to see the law implemented specifically in Israel. I want a biblical Israel. And that's the last thing that we have specifically going on now. It's such a disgrace, and the Zionist and everything that they have to say is
But
makes everything so damn confusing,
it does. But you know what? There's an opportunity here because you could write an amazing book and address this. There is such a need because when you put it down on pen and paper and you chart it out, and I could see you doing this very, very logically, whether you're comparing, this is what the Torah says, but this is what you're doing, kind of like, I will say it, a modern day prophet. That's what Israel needs. I mean, unless there are voices that begin to stand up and begin to speak and say, okay, let's get right. Look at what Martin Luther King Jr. did in the span of 5 short years. I
no,
mean,
it's incredible.
yeah, but you
By the
have,
way, I think I already have. I hope to show the link. I think
okay,
that the solution is so simple, which is to show the world, but even more specifically, just because I'm like born into it, like why wouldn't I try and share this with my own nation? Specifically, the ones who were told to follow these laws as it's written. I just compiled all the laws into one book, and if you remove the law, the building and the maintenance of the temple, and the laws of the Kohanim, which I'm not trying to remove, I'm just trying
no,
to show people the
so
the stepping stones, right?
it's so funny that you say that you're doing that because I'm doing a similar, a parallel project where I've taken the entire Torah, copied and pasted it into a document. I'm subtracting the narrative out of it, and then I'm organizing it. For me, I see the 10 Commandments as 10 categories. Oops, let me see what this
You're
is.
gonna love my book. It's I think it's already done, by the way.
It
Exactly
is.
what you're describing. So it's on Amazon. It's called The Children of Israel, and it's categorized all the
Okay.
tactical laws, starting with the 10 categories, which is the Ten
Okay.
Commandments.
Okay.
And
Oh,
so
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm gonna put that in my cart when we're done.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah,
And
because
once it's done, it's like there's not that much more to do. Like it's a pretty simple thing. God thought it was
it
simple.
is.
He
Well, and
required it of the whole nation,
so
and
how
how
many
could it be
laws,
not
yeah, how many laws did you find actually are
not
applicable to,
613? I could tell you that.
isn't it
I
something
don't need
like
to go and
40,
count them.
60, 40, 60 that
No, no, I mean this is the thing is that when if you start with the Ten Commandments, it's many different variations of how to deal with the same thing. Like, do not murder, right? Like, what if somebody is, axe head fell off and they accidentally killed somebody? We have city of refuge, right? But it's still under the same category of murder. So, in terms of like foundational things to stay away of, I maybe put in about 10 or 12 categories in the whole book, and so like laws of rape, laws of marriage, laws of war, laws of the land, how to treat your fellow, right? I don't see how to treat your fellow like if there's many different instances, like for example, do not have uneven wages, make sure to pay your workers on time, right? Don't take somebody's pledge for if that's all they have, just give it back to them, even if they can't pay it. These all are all under like the laws of human treatment, right? So I'm not like nitpicking each one. Like I don't know how we possibly came to 613. You know, it's
well,
very
there's
weird
so
even to
much.
just say that broadly. Like I
Yeah.
don't think we could ever get a specific number. All I can tell you is it's not that much,
No,
right?
it's
If
not.
we can start with the Ten Commandments and the many different variations that exist there, you exist in the culture of people, even not keeping the first five, but people who don't kill you, take your things, uh, want the things that you have, try to lie about you under oath, and hate you in their heart. Like a lot of people love to say that, oh, like the golden rule, and like everybody knows the golden rule: treat your neighbor like yourself, right? But if you treat yourself like shit, you don't treat other people very well.
I
And
made I made that point in my volume one.
yeah,
I made that exact
yeah, absolutely. And this is in psychology. How are you supposed to love others if you do not love yourself?
right.
Um, that it isn't the golden rule. God didn't put treat your neighbor like yourself in the Ten Commandments. He told you stop killing, murdering, committing adultery, stealing, and bearing false witness and coveting all the time. Okay. And if you really want to get close to me, then you should acknowledge me as God. You shouldn't say my name in vain. You shouldn't worship other idols. And you keep the Sabbath and you honor your father and your mother. And I see the first five commandments being like, you want to be more like me, because God gave you your parents. God's telling you who you are and how to get a grip on these things, and then the next five follow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm in totally agree. I am so excited to see this book because I want to compare it to what I've done, the work that I've done, and um, it is just what our society needs. But I think from you, I think there's also a need for I would say an emotional plea for people
Oh,
to get
actually, I already have that one too. It's a bit of an
okay.
unfortunate story, but you see, all of this really like took off. Look, I can tell you the last thing on earth I wanted to do was become a rabbi.
Right.
And if I'm going to be honest with you, this is for everybody who like follows me. You can have a 15-year-old boy who's got smicha from Torah.com who doesn't know the difference between his left and his right hand, or you can listen to somebody who knows the history and the literature and uses the term rabbi because it just means teacher. If I was a Christian, I would say that I was a priest. I don't need ordaining from anybody to do this job, and I'm doing it. Here's the proof in the pudding, right? And it is also to kind of piss people off a little bit. I'd be totally down. Let's get rid of the rabbi label. Like, I don't really care. The Rebbeim have been ridiculous over the past 2,000 years. They've offered virtually nothing except confusion, mysticism, straying from God's word, a dirty way of living, and like honestly, a very big door for satanic worship. And people don't really know what that's like. And the Jews are guilty of a lot of things. And like I am a part of the nation and I grew up in the traditional sense. what's going on in the media is definitely not true. Like, yeah, okay, it might be weird to you as an outsider to see somebody take a Havdalah candle and dip it in wine and then dip their fingers in and like do this stuff, and they want to get themselves wealth, so they touch their pockets. But and then they get even weirder in like Hasidic cultures where they're like taking kids and they're like dipping their feet in it. But they're not doing Satanism. Like they're also not like killing Christian babies and using their blood to like make matzahs. And so, but they are putting with this weird behavior, they're putting themselves in a box, and that quality of living, willing to do all of these things in the structure, ultimately keeps the people dumb and poor, right? And then the only person who really benefits from this is the rabbi, because that's who everybody comes to.
And that is a point that I make over and over again, because that's pretty much universal with all religion. What I find that when you see Deuteronomy 4:2, 12:32, when it says, don't add or take away from the law commandments that I've given you this day. When Jehovah says that, he's given us something that's pure and something that's real. But what man does is they will add to, they will take away, they will manipulate it. All of a sudden, you need that pastor, preacher to interpret it for you. So you're relying on them rather than what's plainly written that you can just take out and say, hey, it's like never being able to do math on your own, always having to have
Mhm.
somebody do math for you because you're told you can't figure it out. But you're kept relying on that person, and they end up perverting it. They end up changing it
Completely.
to something that's totally different. What we know now about chemical compounds. I mean, you can just change the direction and shape of one of the compounds. You just change one little component of that compound, and it becomes something completely different. I think I remember somewhere that the compound between, I think it's cheese and plastic, is actually very similar. So you
Mm.
just, trade out one or two of those compounds and you have something completely different. And the same thing with pastors, priests, rabbis. Um, they change it, but they do that so that because it really comes down to
Yeah,
that.
they win. It comes to
They win.
self-benefit,
Well, and they don't want you to rely on the text. They don't want you to have an I can
I mean,
attitude.
again, as like, I don't know, followers of the rabbi or something, like we're supposed to eat these people's crumb in order to make parnasa, which is money. Like that's a tradition. Like we eat their crumbs. Like, are you serious right now? And like, maybe I'd eat your crumbs if you were like some stud 6'5" king, with like a beautiful wife. But when you're like a 5'2" goblin, like who hasn't seen the sun, in years, like I am actually repulsed. This is not what God wants from us. And to kind of segue back to the emotional side of things, to tell you actually what I feel God has pulled me into this position in life. I This is another thing. I'm born in California. I come from a family, a mother who grew up like a Moroccan princess, and my father, who is a very famous actor and musician and a rock star. And they both essentially, I mean, my mother was born Jewish, but she found Judaism much later in life. My father converted to Judaism much later in life. And they had me and five, well, there's six total brothers in general. And all four of us from my mom are all entrepreneurs. We're all very young to have made it as entrepreneurs too. And I grew up helping out my community tremendously. Like these are people who went from rock stars to like overweight Orthodox people who even oppress their own children, regardless if they knew it or not. Right now, they never had that intention, and I have literally the greatest parents on earth. But I'm pretty sure they put me in this position so I do an even better job than them. Right, and
Right?
I hope to do the same with my children. And I live in this Orthodox community, and I kind of, if you hear a little bit about what I was telling you with my older brother and how much I respect him and him being Orthodox, where well, I got engaged to a girl in my community who was my neighbor, and things should have been perfect, but the rabbi and the community said that we would disown you, and she needs to become a career woman, or you need to go to yeshiva and become more yeshivish. That relationship didn't end. Within a 6-month window, I found another woman who I got engaged to, who was also my neighbor, fresh off the boat Israeli, who said she wanted to be a wife and her mother. Her parents convinced her that you need to be a secular woman pursuing a career. And so marrying this guy would be an exact opposition to that. So two times did I go through broken engagements from religious girls who were my neighbor who presumed that they wanted to be wives and mothers. And like, I'm not blind to the fact that I've also been part of the culture, like I'm not a typical guy. Uh, you should be very, very lucky to just as like put all this like religious bullshit aside, like if two people find each other attractive, like you're already like such winners.
Right.
And but we had so much more going for us based on that scenario. And this happened twice to me. In order to get better, I was writing in a journal for the first time in my life. And that was in between the first and the second engagement. By the end of the second engagement, uh, I published my journal and I called it a prayer because I literally had to write prayer every single night for the course of like, I don't know, 60 days or something. And in order to get better, I had to publish it. So I published that. And then down the line, about a year later, I wrote the Children of Israel so that people could have the law. So I figure uh, just to kind of fill you in, because you
Good,
said, you should
good,
do something emotional and you should do something more literal. I happen to have gotten both of those out of the way, but I'm sure there'll be more to come.
good.
Um,
Yeah, because your voice is very, very needed. It's
thank
definitely
you.
something I think that we are on like just the dawn of a new day.
Mhm,
And it feels a lot like I think what Jeremiah says, where we're standing at the fork in the road. Um, and the world is either going to take a fork towards righteousness or we're going to cave back into that cycle of chaos. If you think of a
mhm,
point of singularity where it bursts forth in brightness and creation, or it collapses back in darkness and, just oppression, where it just is very, very compact. So we're going one of two ways. I don't think that that's been decided yet. The choice is in our hands. But once we cross a certain
absolutely.
threshold, it will become very hard to come back to that light simply because the taskmasters that will be in place will, if you've read 1984,
Oh yeah, this is
you
identical to 1984. I love that book.
yeah, you know the cycle.
Um,
Yeah, I think it's called the Titler cycle. So, you have a righteous generation. They do what is right. They're very just. They're very moral and upstanding. They have kids. Their kids are pretty good, follow what their parents do. But then the grandkids, they come along and they're pretty well spoiled, and they go, well, why should we be doing this? I
mhm.
just am going to do what I want to do. Begins to fall into chaos. Then there's oppression, financial disaster, and you find a lot of times there's some calamity in there where there's some sort of population collapse. And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden their kids are like going, okay, well,
Yeah, I mean, you can look at our culture. I've said this many times, specifically on the podcast, but the Roman and the Greek Empire fell from the same cycle. And, as Americans, we have like another 500 years to go before we match any of these great empires. And the reasons that they fell were because uh, there was a rise in homosexuality, there was a glorification of male genitalia, and the borders were run thin, and the government control was all over the place. And so they just got invaded and they lost a 1,000-year empire. We have the exact same thing going on in this generation at this particular moment. There is complete gender confusion, like to the max, to the horror of horrors. And then you have absolute glorification of male genitalia, or really just any of it in general, in the opposite spectrum this time. And then you have, yeah, our borders being completely infiltrated, and the governing powers from all over the world are not lining up well, and everybody's in confusion. Like, honestly, I have a lot to be focusing on beyond all of this like religious stuff. To me, the baseline of Torah actually is that even if this stuff were written by human beings and it wasn't made by God, right?
mhm.
As human beings, we can objectively look at this as a brilliant piece of literature that improves the quality of life. And so, thus, you would teach it to your children in the fashion it says to.
Mm.
That has to be the baseline. If you wanted to add God being a literal and all of these things literally happening into the equation, I think you're an individual who's opened a door to endless possibilities and we'll likely see them. I hope I see them.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm very much on that literal side. You
Oh,
know,
as am I, as am I. But
well,
I
and you,
definitely don't come into disagreements.
you're right. Well, and this is the thing too, because one of the things and I'm sure you do this too, is I think, okay, how do we get back to this society that Yehovah talks about, that the prophets talk about, where there's peace,
Mhm.
there's harmony between all nations. It isn't like one nation has this agenda to commit genocide against different people, or one nation is just out for themselves to the detriment of all other nations. How do we get back to this? And I think part of this process, and I'm going to look strictly with America, we have about 4 generations, at least since World War II, but probably even before World War II, of such dysfunction. Parents who don't know how to treat their children, who are either abusive, or who don't know how to communicate. Back then you just kind of fell in line and you just kind of, went with the flow. Today, kids aren't willing to do that. They very much challenge everything. So there has to be some process, maybe mentoring process, where families are mentoring parents, along the way, because the parents have to be healed in this process for the kids to really be healed.
Oh man,
And you
I
can,
love hearing this from you, by the way, because it is a generational thing, and I'm of a different generation than you are, and it's pretty clear to me that we're the ones that need to be helping our parents.
yeah,
And all of these people, like even take my ex-fiancés, for example, right? They both chose their parents' role for them when their parents ultimately I want to be profane to some degree. It's like that they effed up, and like I don't know how you can't see that. Like these are clearly traumatized kids who like not no everybody in my generation loves to talk about their trauma. Okay. So it's
yeah,
like, where do you think all your trauma came from? You're not willing to accept something new for yourself, not willing to take on a new path. How could you not see that it's you who needs to help your parents? And this is a huge generational issue with all the guys of my age.
yeah,
We need to set the standard for all the younger kids because that's who they're
yes,
looking up to, and there's nobody to look up to.
right.
So this next generation feels like it's just going to die out. It's going to be something even worse than we've ever seen, and I really hope not. But whenever you see a bright soul who makes the right connections, you do obviously feel revitalized.
Yeah, kind of like a Torah Brothers program.
Yeah,
Something
yeah,
like
and look,
that.
again, it's a human condition thing.
It is.
If you found God and his way of living without the Torah, we are brothers and we want the same outcome. To me, the literature is a very easy way for us to come together. Like it's already been done. Like why wouldn't we utilize it, right? But Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Noah, these are all individuals who weren't like everybody else. And it's a lonely journey, but ultimately Noah survived and repopulated society. The rest of the world died out.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think that today the journey can be so less lonely simply because there are so many of us that are there. I know for myself, I have 3 very close friends that are pretty much, we're all, lock and step, and we came there independently of each other. Um,
Mhm.
they all came back to Torah. They all came back to out of their perspective religions to see, oh my goodness, this is good. This is the only thing that works. And because of that love, we then made other connections. And it's just been very, very rewarding, very meaningful. I find
Mhm.
that, even greater than love in life is a life filled with meaning, a life filled with purpose. When you
Absolutely.
have that, that creates love, because everything else is real. It's not just this emotion, not just hot air, not just something where you're in the moment. it's something that's lasting, and it really transcends all of the feelings that come out of the purpose and the meaning, and even the righteousness, the righteous and the benefit and the justice and all of that. They just all play, and they're very cohesive. Um, but coming back to your point about helping parents, children helping parents, by doing that, by the child helping, and in some ways, that
By the
child,
way, it does say that is there is a prophecy of Isaiah that says this. It says that the children will have to help the parents.
well, it says the
Um, and
child shall lead them.
yes, exactly. And it also talks about a time where your leaders will mislead you and women will dominate you, right? And so we're living that time. And, I really love these prophecies and I value the literature of the Old Testament tremendously. I just love the story of King David. Yet I don't want people to get lost on trying to figure out what prophecies are, because life is so much more tactical than that. There's so many things you need to do on a day to day just to get into the next one. And there's good and bad days. Yet you have to show up to all of them nonetheless. And the five books gives you a very tactical response on how to do it. That's why I was so compelled to try and show people that the laws are not infinite. Like a 24-year-old could go through it and compile all of the laws in there and show you. And if you doubted me, you could just go ahead and check the literature, right? And uh, that to me is the best that I can come up with. Everything that I'm striving for at the moment actually comes back to your point about generations of peace, which create generations of war and the cycle. That if we're back in this place where we are not in the generation of peace, then we need to do, again, repeating that cycle of striving for peace, even if it's for 10 years, for 20 years, for 30 years. If I don't get to live it, but my children get to live it, what the hell are we all living for every single day if it's not striving for a period of peace?
Right. Yeah, and I think in some ways it's easier to get there. It's much harder to stay there,
Mhm.
because of the human
That's like anything.
yeah, complacency, or in your workout, you'll plateau, if you get a little too comfortable, if you're not pushing yourself hard enough, or if you just, get bored with it. And I think human boredom plays a key part of all this, because we want objects at rest, want to stay at rest. So
Mhm.
we get complacent with where we are, and we really don't see, oh my goodness, things are kind of falling apart around us. And so it's not just us, but it's inspiring the society around us to have this renewed love, to have this renewed commitment. And that you can, because I think in both Judaism and Christianity, you're really told that the law, the written law, is something that you can't do. It's something that either A, it's not important, or it was
I
written.
mean, even the New Testament says follow the law of Moses. That's the
Yeah,
whole thing. Christ was this Jew who came down and was better than everybody, right? So he, what did he say? He said, stop misinterpreting the text and start following it by the way of Moses, right?
exactly.
And I like the New Testament as that frame, and I encourage people to find God to whatever medium they can. Honestly, we didn't get to touch base on this, but you said you had a messianic phase, right? And
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, and I because it's a great opportunity to create additional clarity there. The definition of Messiah is anointed one. So if by anointed one you mean that God chose him to be a hero of the time, right? Then that is an accurate thing that has happened many, many times. And there's Samson, there's David, there's Solomon, there's Samuel, and there's Christ, there's Moses, right?
Maccabees.
There's just tons and tons of messiahs. But that is not the typical definition of Messiah. Just because it's literally the definition does not mean that people accept it upon themselves like that. The idea of the Messiah is that there is going to be some sort of resurrection of an already existing historical figure that comes back and saves you from this life. Okay. I don't think this life needs any saving from. Okay. I also there's nothing in the literature to support that. People are constantly pointing at Shiloh, when if you're being realistic with what it's saying that the scepter is going to be taken from you, right? And the only person who was holding a scepter was the kings of Israel, which happened 1500 years. So it is a revelation. And they lost it after Solomon, who could easily have been Shiloh, right? Like, but again,
And I
I'm
make that
inserting.
point in my volume 1. I make that
Mhm.
exact point in
Oh, I'm so glad you came to
yeah,
the same conclusion, but
I did.
I gloss over it very easy because it just doesn't really offer that much to my life. Like this
Right.
somewhat arbitrarily line about Shiloh is like so much less compelling than like guidelines of how to live and treat people within a frame of justice, you know, and
Right.
that is why I completely I don't mind at all completely disregarding the Messiah, right? And this is also a thing with God and all religions that I have come to distaste, which is everybody is telling you that like, oh, you know, you wait until the end of days when you're weeping in front of Christ, or you're weeping in front of Yahweh, or you're weeping in front of Baal, you know, like look, we're all going to have to figure it out when we get there, right? Right now, you're looking at good and bad people, people who support life, people who do not, people who are murderers and thieves, people who are not murderers and thieves. And I want to be closer to the side that are people that are good, people who are not murderers and thieves. And that is really the goal, you know, to start educating people, particularly our
Absolutely.
youth, on this. And
Absolutely. Well,
it's so
and
refreshing to hear your take on this as well.
thank you. Thank you. I've played out, every scenario that I can possibly think of in my mind. And just, if we look at the current situation in Iran right now, you could go in, you could topple the regime that's there, but you still have 90 million people. Half of them may identify as Persian. Some of them are going to have a totally different ideology.
I mean, they're oppressed by their own government.
They are, but you do have
So
quite a few people who agree with their extremist stance. I've met some of those people, and
sure, but you know,
and
even this extremist sorry,
well,
go
yeah.
continue.
Let me make
Yeah,
my
yeah.
point here, because
Hmm.
so even and what we've learned, in 150 years, whether it would be the Kingdom of Great Britain, whether it's the United States, you go in, you topple a government, and you put in a new administration. The people, you can't make people believe somewhere. You can't make them accept something. Christianity really did that. Even Islam does that, where they go in and you're going to convert unless we're going to kill everybody unless some sort of forced conversion. You had the Inquisitions that did that. So where I am right now, what I see is the most effective way, and I see this supported by scripture too, is that we really have to have an outreach campaign of education. And I really think that this path to salvation, of having peace on earth, comes through education. We have to win hearts and minds. Proverbs says that those who win souls are wise. People, I know Judaism isn't really
Well,
keen
again,
on
there's no,
evangelism,
no.
but
It
that's really
is
what it comes
that
down to.
that's a sep. They did that later in time.
Yeah.
That's essentially this is where all the division comes from the Jews. That is totally. First of all, we're in complete agreement as far as this. Like I said earlier, the way that seems to work for most people is when it's posed as a suggestion, right? And when given it as a piece of the literature, it starts to become a part of your life. And it seems to work on people who are like too far gone, right? So that should give us hope as a nation and people. And um, yeah, it needs to be in the education system for sure. I've said it actually as if it just came down to one thing uh, to instantly help our situation here in the United States would be to start teaching the Bible in the school system again.
Amen.
You know,
Amen.
that I mean, it's a pretty simple solution, and it's not going to be that hard. It would give people a lot more train of thought. Like there are young boys and girls who are honestly like, why in the world would I want to be outside clubbing right now? Like when I I've already made a pretty decent living for myself, and I can come home to my beautiful wife, and
Mhm.
I can actually start having children and living life as it was intended. Like that's a lot more interesting to me than going out clubbing and having an infinite amount of boyfriends and girlfriends and
Right.
taking place. like again, like our college system literally creates drug addicts,
Mhm.
you know, like we have this like homelessness problem here in Los Angeles when we're funding the homelessness issue, you know, and we can't even be honest with the fact that like instead of getting to the point where your kids are in an AA program to where they're learning the Bible, could we catch them earlier to where they never had to be part of a drug
Right,
rehabilitation program? Because once you're part of a drug rehabilitation program, you never leave.
right.
It's scary. Yeah, sure, it's your salvation, right? But once you have pissed off God and are now cursed off to wandering 40 years in the desert, yes, you are fortunate enough that God didn't kill you, but you still are wandering in the desert for 40 years and you are cursed, you know. And so I don't want that for our upcoming generation, for my generation. And when you're indoctrinating people with certain lines of thought and not giving them multiple ways of coming to the same conclusion, that's already not education. And to follow it up with endless test taking, then you have useless people coming out into society where the only thing they could have done for the past 10 years in this college system is to fulfill all my test taking and then do drugs all weekend and party. And so you have like super, super broken people coming out of this.
It really comes down to the fact that everything you're just describing is a life that lacks meaning, a life that lacks real purpose that fills the heart and the soul. Um, and when you take God out of the equation, when you take, and this is the other thing too, is like whether you're on the Jewish side or the Christian side, you can believe in God. That's still empty. In the New Testament, it's faith without works is
Mm-hmm.
dead. And that's very, very true because if you believe something, if you really believe it, you're going to follow through and you're going to do it. And that doing has such rich rewards, such meaning, and such intention. And when we live life without intention, it's not fulfilling. And so then you look for something else to fulfill that emptiness, whether it's drugs, whether it's bad relationships, whether it's an abusive relationship itself. You can become addicted to really bad relationships. So all of those things we do use as band-aids or as cotton, balls to try to fill that hole where it's like if we just do what God says, we
Well,
don't even have a hole.
I can speak about this just as a young man without many alternatives. And I've come to this conclusion, which is not exactly pleasant, but it also kind of needs to happen. You see, there used to be a traditional way of living. And if you wanted to go about it from the form of marriage, even outside of religion, a man gets a woman who acknowledges that I'm a virgin who is going to be committed to you and loyal, and you now have ownership over me because I'm giving you ownership because you are going to take care of me and provide for me for the rest of my life unless I am sent away through being immoral, right? And the men continue to provide and fulfill on that side of the equation. But women are no longer loyal virgins that are going to be committed to being wives and mothers. And so this puts men in a position where they can either be alone, right? And just like wait indefinitely. It's actually not the answer for young men right now. I know it sucks, but you're going to lose your masculinity. And the alternatives, this actually happened recently where a Brazilian community had sued Elon Musk because they got cheap internet and then the whole community got addicted to internet porn, right? And this is like just it's what happens. It's what happens. And when you have lonely men who are like trying to stay strong to, just like make it through, actually, they need to be interacting with women as much as possible, even if it's just having girlfriends or maybe it's a short term relationship, whatever it is. Men are really the only ones who can help women understand that, like, maybe you're not going to be my wife, but you try and help that woman, try and help her, okay? Because women are literally going off a cliff right now.
Oh,
They're going off a cliff
Well,
And at a certain point in their biological time clock, that's a horror right there. They can no
it
longer have children, and nobody's going to want to marry them. And you're looking at tons of young girls with super high body counts who are now supposed to live out the rest of their lives completely alone, right? We don't really know what the horror of this is going to look like. Again, if you look on Google to who's happy with, what is the percentage of transsexuals who are unhappy with their transition? Google says it's 1%.
Mhm.
You understand that it's obvious bullshit propaganda. If there was a 1% unhappiness to anything, we would be taking it up all the time. So what we're really looking at is mental illness is being pushed upon people, and people are going to be going to a level of self-destruction they have no awareness of. Like,
Absolutely.
I'm not entirely uncertain that, like, in the middle of a supermarket midday, some transsexual might just light themselves on fire because they can't take it anymore. Okay. Like, that is more likely of a conclusion than for all of us to be okay and for everybody to be happy, you know? And I am concerned for young men because they're losing their masculinity, their ability to work, their drive, their purpose. The government is funding them in order to be useless people in society. So it's really incumbent upon men to interact with women and try to teach them and help them in whatever frame they can. It's been a really unfortunate one to come to, but like I said, I personally been engaged to women who love me, and there was two broken engagements under the fact that them included, because like, at the end of the day, these girls could have made a choice for themselves, but the communities, the rabbis, the priests, and the parents are all telling them to commit to this way of life, and that like that's not going to happen a second time around, and it's very disastrous. So I wanted to bring that up to you to see if you had any insight from what you're seeing from the younger generation and this manifesting.
Well, I'm seeing the same thing, and it really comes down to, and I do believe that this is by design. I think
Hmm.
that, you don't have to know a lot about psychology to know how important identity is. And I actually talk about this in my latest book, which is Does Jesus Exist? Um, and what I find is that governments, religions destroy a righteous identity. We've been hearing, especially, what during the Obama years, oh, you're colonizers, you're white this, you're this, you're that, you're oppressors, you stole land. You hear that on the Jewish side, but you also hear it on the American side.
Hmm.
All these fake
Well, that's
narratives.
the problem with the propaganda, right? The
Right,
Jews and America are the bad guys,
right.
and the good guys are the Muslims. Like,
Well, yeah,
what? Like,
they're the ones
where's
who
this?
blow themselves up, commit terrorist and
Right.
all this.
I mean,
But
it's
what this
actually
is,
silly.
it's a process of destroying a good, healthy identity. Because once you destroy
Hmm.
that person's identity, so growing up in the church, it was always no matter what you do, why even bother with the law? Because you will never be good enough. No matter what you do, no matter what you try, you're never going to get there. So just don't bother. So it's still that challenging of a righteous identity. And that identity is so important in making us stand strong, in making us actually have joy and happiness and purpose, because that identity informs everything else. So when I think of myself, I think of somebody who loves Yahweh, somebody who walks in Torah, somebody who lives a good life. But when you say you live a good life, most people define that very ambiguously. I have something to
Hmm.
actually quantify that. It's like I can say, okay, well, how did I keep the Sabbath this week? Okay, well, how did I treat my fellow man? Okay, well, in this business transaction, there was a conflict. I didn't defraud them, but I held up my end of the bargain, but yet I didn't let myself be taken advantage of. So you can go through all this checklist, and it's something you
Hmm.
can quantify. It's something you can hold on to, that's real, that's tangent, that makes your life better. So I think for this next generation, it's giving them the tools, which is through education, books, workbooks. Those I think are very, very essential. But more
We
than
need
that,
to teach history. History
absolutely
is
foundation.
completely destroyed. It's the
Yeah.
1984 photocopy right
Exactly.
now.
Exactly. But I think also is important for this generation is we really need some sort of online community whether it's like a Facebook group or a Discord group or something that brings people together where they can exchange
You
ideas. It
know,
needs some
this
structure.
one's tough. This one's tough because part of the issue of the modern generation is that everybody is not present. There's such a lack of presentness
Yes.
because of the integration of technology into everything, right? And people are choosing integration of technology over their own humanity. I made this point the other day because Elon Musk was talking about that they can make people who are blind start to see again because they found some sort of like chips and they create like a technological color. And from his standpoint, like we're all going to be superheroes at that point. But if you've ever seen like the film Minority Report, I don't know, that'd be a random
Yes.
one.
Yeah.
So you have, right? So
Yeah.
you know how he's like
Tom
on this
Cruise,
really
right?
dirty table. That's right. Is with Tom Cruise. He's on this really dirty table with like disgusting food in the fridge, and they're cutting out his eyeballs in order to give him new eyeballs, right? And he did want to keep his old eyeballs because they're his mother's eyeballs, right? But the point is all of that's a damn horror. It's a horror, right? And obviously, why is that a far stretch if like you're able to mutilate men and women and then convince them that they're of the opposite
Right.
gender?
Oh, well, I
You know,
totally agree.
you can do
But
anything. You can do absolutely anything.
but coming back to, the intention in your own life and in your own community, I think you have to balance, but I can say for myself,
Well, the reason I mentioned that, by the
mhm,
way, was presentness. Presentness is what's lacking. So
right.
another like online group and online this, there has got to be a way to create a healthy balance of all of
Oh,
this technology and
absolutely.
being a human being again, valuing your own
Well, you
humanity.
you could have a group where maybe you meet at a particular time, like, whether, it's like going to a synagogue, you're going to meet here for 2 hours or maybe 1 hour. So if it's structured and it's timed, you're not going to be just in it all the time. But I
Mhm.
do find, I know from my personal life,
Oh, so were you referring to like me specifically to do that,
but not necessarily, well, it
or
could
was more
be you.
broadly?
What could
Okay,
be
okay.
you could, but when I say you, you are a representative of a lot of other young men who are feel in the same boat. I have a
Mhm.
friend who has four boys, ages 26 to 17, and they're very isolated. There are no women. I mean, they have been, anywhere that they are around, the women are not quality. They would not consider them. And these boys have very high standards. And I know
I
on the
understand,
other
but
spectrum,
remember what I said earlier, right?
uh,
Is that these men should be interacting with these women. I know it's not pleasant,
right.
but you got to. You don't have an alternative. The best thing you can hold on to, because things are going to be funky and weird, is that perhaps I can help this woman, right? And
Well, I think you have to
because
be,
we're going
yeah,
into it's tricky, but
yeah.
I'm just telling you that all these men who are disappointed with these women are lonely and dealing with all the other problems
So,
of complete loneliness, which are actually worse.
right.
They're actually
There
worse.
is a better way. So let me tell you
Okay,
some
I would love to hear
success.
this,
Yeah, here's
please.
some success stories. So one of the things that as part of my ministry that I do is I host a youth retreat every year. And we'll get together for about 4 days. And so far, we've had two marriages that have come out of those. And these are marriages that are 5 years in, very happy marriages, very good marriages, because they both come with a Torah-based foundation. Um, and we may be working on our third marriage that may have been coming out of this last youth retreat that we had. But what I find is that it comes down to bringing people together. When you bring, because let me tell you, there are just as many women out there looking for good guys, and they're not finding good guys. I know a lot of my
Oh
friends
yeah, yeah,
who feel the same way.
absolutely. But
So it's
that's the whole point is that men have removed their masculinity from this world
yes,
by allowing this tragedy to affect them. They have to still continue to function and live
oh,
on as men. And the
absolutely.
right girl will come in the right time. But
Right.
there is so little, the reason women are so dissatisfied with men is because they're no longer masculine.
Right.
And
Well,
the
that's
same
part of it.
exists for women. There's a massive shift in women becoming more masculine, pursuing
Definitely.
careers, abandoning their uterus. You know, you might as well just
Well,
say it
they
like
they
straight
just
out.
they don't value children. Children are an opposition to, they're an inconvenience rather than the
I mean,
person.
that's insane, you
Yeah,
know.
it is insane. It's
Again,
total insanity. But what I have found has just been so fun and rewarding is bringing young people together from, I mean, people come from like 5, 10 states away. We meet for a few days, we share ideas. Oh my goodness, these kids have so much energy. There is so much joy, so much life, and they make real connections with other people who share like
that's
values.
awesome.
But guess
I
what
love that.
unites them? Guess what the thing that unites them and makes them have these amazing points of fellowship?
The Torah.
Absolutely, it is the Torah.
Yeah. Well,
It,
that is the
that
thing that would be uniting people in general. I'm all about that.
yeah,
I couldn't be any more about it. And if you're doing that and it's having success stories, I wish you tremendous success and that it continue to happen. And if it's somehow going to affect a huge population of people, that would be awesome.
it would
But
be.
you see, the same people who are creating the issues that are existing do say the same thing within their own frame. And I have to call out those structures for what they are and how they've been doing. I'll start with the ultra religious. Okay. Everybody has got to put their life story on a piece of paper, and then we have to send it out to each other. So they have these thing called resumes, and then they share photos. And it's basically a version of online dating. Not to mention that I'm in Los Angeles, California. I think there's like 500,000 Jews here in California. That's a lot of people. I don't need to get on a plane and fly to Florida in order to meet my wife. Okay. Actually, I have way too much going on. If I have the luxury to do that, I am again part of those men who are not masculine and not ready to get married and are seeking the wrong thing. Okay. It is incumbent upon mothers and fathers to set their daughters and their children up. You know, it's actually not to profane your daughters to harlotry. So I would start with stop sending your girls to college. You're removing them from any sort of boundaries and you're putting them in schools with lots and lots of men and you're giving them their own dorm in order to do that with. Oh, and you can mix drugs into the equation. So you're instantly profaning your daughters to harlotry. And when it comes to the men, men need to work, you know. And
Mhm.
so we are here focusing. It would be a natural thing for a young man in a community to stand out to a given man and say, hey, perhaps you'd like to go on a date with my daughter, you know, or like at the very least, somebody like human instead of like, oh, let's change pieces of paper and we're going to do this with hundreds of thousands of people until somebody says yes. And people reject this all the time because they're like, oh, actually, like his uh, I don't know, he's not tall enough. Like
Right.
something absolutely arbitrary. Oh wait, he doesn't speak Hebrew, and I'm bilingual. You know, and it's giving people this position of power to nitpick when they have absolutely no idea what they want. You know, all that's going to go out the door when you're sitting in front of this wonderful young woman and or this incredible young man, right?
Right.
And they don't even allow themselves to have the opportunity. So yes, it's very good to gather people together and allow them to interact with each other in a healthy environment. That is, I'm totally about, right? This should be taking places in churches, it should be taking places in schools, whatever sort of community exists. But this online dating thing and getting people to fly and do events in order to meet each other, like ultimately, it's probably going to take place within the place that you live, you know, within a pretty, you know, maybe walking distance. You know, like that makes more sense to me than the alternative. And the dating apps are from actual hell because all of that's, you know, promiscuity. And so the hopes is that people would just be setting up their children, that they would want their children to marry. And this is a natural process. The economy here, separating people from being able to do that, right? Again, government is totally involved. The school systems are absolutely guilty of this. Um, and those are really the main two ones that are stopping people from getting together,
Mhm. Yeah.
you
No,
know. And so
it's
I got to call it
definitely
out. It's so disastrous. It's so disastrous. And people are not getting together, right? Because they're not willing to interact with their neighbors and their people. It's the same idea that comes from the school system. Like, oh, I wouldn't have any friends if I didn't go to school. It's like, A, you don't have any friends and you do go to school. All right, that's the majority of people. And B, if you were at home living a life with your family, then you would be interacting with your neighbors and you would be interacting with life, which would be putting a lot more people into your immediate frame instead of 40 strangers in a classroom that you never talk to.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
It's a disaster. And again, the legal age of marriage is different everywhere. In the Torah, it's not really defined. I mean, there's the maiden, right? Young maiden. So she's at least able to be on a period, be a mother. So the Gemara is like the where this distaste comes from like 3-year-old girls and stuff. If a girl that is able to have children is very young, I'm like typically not for that because it's just taboo. It's weird. You're like, it's
Well,
taboo,
so
right?
medically speaking, a woman has to be fully grown for it not to actually harm her. So that puts her
Okay.
at about over 16 years of age, 18 years of age at least. For her
Well,
to,
it can't be 18, you see, because you're dealing with like John Locke, like marrying a princess, Pocahontas here in America, who was roaming around that town ever since she was a 14-year-old girl, and she married a 35-year-old guy. So history really seems to disagree with that point of view.
well,
Society is not what defines these standards. The Torah does, right? And we're doing what the Torah is encouraging us to do, which is have these conversations. This is gray area. We should create a justice system. We should have these discussions and we should implement them, right? But when you get into this gray area conversation, obviously, if culture has been able to define that Jews are dirty, disgusting, vile creatures be below even that of a disease, then it's much easier to kill them. But the culture defined that. God didn't define it. And so these things start to become difficult too, right? Because there are a lot of young women who are fully developed and should be moving towards being wives and mothers. And instead, they're waiting till they're done with college. You know, like if 18 was the law and we all came to that discussion, why is it 16 in certain states over here?
right.
And how come history has shown that there's been huge success stories with girls who are fully developed, even queens who've been able to build empires, empowering themselves through their womanhood.
Right.
And so it's very tough. It's very, very tough. I would for sure eliminate all that awful stuff in the Gemara. I'm not a fan at all. And that's actually where the bad stuff starts to get in, the elitism, the pedophilia, the child molestation, all of it tends to come from there, which again is rabbi made, and
It
where all of
it's all
my
man-made.
distaste comes from.
It is. It's all man-made. And it's like, and that I think is where we agree so much is that when you return to the written text, you're left with that what actually works. Yes, we're not told, marry at this age or don't marry at this age or how exactly, line and sinker, how do you sanctify the Shabbat?
Well, again,
But
we can
I
actually
think,
just.
well, but from my perspective, I see
Mhm.
God leaving a lot of openness for people to do things different way. I don't see where he's given you a law that's a way of life. It's a philosophy. Yes, it's a legal code, but it's also a philosophical life and a lifestyle that you lead. And you should be able to take that and apply it to other areas of your life that make it better. And I don't see where
Absolutely.
he wanted everybody to wear the same color of clothing, have the same traditions, just be locked
No,
carbon
not
copy
at
of
all.
each other over and over and over again. And I use this example. When you look at creation, God has a real sense of humor. I mean, the giraffe. Think about it. The giraffe. I mean, that's such a funny creature. The hippo, the rhino, dogs, cats, ostriches. I mean, these are animals where there's a sense of humor going on. I mean, he created diversity in animals, he created diversity in our ecosystem, he created diversity of the fish in the oceans. I mean, we probably only know maybe 40-50% of what is actually lives in the oceans because some of it is so deep down that we can't even get to it. So a God who loves such diversity we try to limit that diversity in our religion. And I'm not saying within the context of the written Torah, but we still try to make ourselves birds of a feather that flock together, where we look just like our neighbor and we do things. So I just see God
Well, there's
participating.
great utility in
Yeah,
uniformity,
yeah,
and
mhm.
modesty is one of those things that's not discussed in the five books of Moses.
No,
The
it's
only thing that is discussed is that an adulterous woman who's brought to court from a jealous husband who will be fined and ridiculed for making a bad claim, but also potentially could be right that his wife is an adulterer, that she were to uncover her hair. And so we derive from this that we're supposed to wear wigs on our head. Like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. It's like saying,
uh,
you know, God, because people used to wear like threads on their fingers for a sign of marriage, and we took it off so that we could bathe. Now we're going to wear invisible wedding rings.
right.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And so these things are cultural. Obviously, a woman's body is sacred, right? From the just again, if there are naked women running around, what sort of culture do you exist with, right? So if you were to ask a woman, what is the definition of modesty? It's cover up more. And if you want to be less modest, you cover up less, right? But it's a spectrum that's not defined, and it ultimately exists for people to apply to their lives in a given context.
And the culture does determine, because if you go, say, to Africa, there's many cultures there where if a woman covers her breasts, because in many African nations,
Oh, they
the
do not.
breasts do not evoke, sexual context. They're actually
Well, they do. There's
fertility.
tons of incest. There's tons of incest in these cultures. So we have direct correlation to a lack of modesty creates. I mean, right now in Los Angeles, California, there
Mhm.
are like 6-year-old girls in booty shorts and tube tops.
Oh, I
It's
know.
insane. And these
I've
people's
seen that.
parents are putting it on them. It's in Target. They have little bathing suits for children to tuck their penises. Okay. This is
Oh, yeah,
insane. This is
it
insane.
is. It's totally insane.
And so you get to see that when we start getting less and less modest, we start to have these sort of problems. So maybe we should start bringing it back that there's some value to modesty. And just because it's not discussed in the Torah doesn't mean it shouldn't be discussed amongst people. Again, the Torah is not going to tell you how to make your bed in the morning. It doesn't tell you to brush your teeth. It doesn't tell you how to build a fridge. But we do all these amazing things that give us utility. I find the Torah to be a limited piece of work. It tells you what it has to tell you, and it doesn't tell you more than that. It says, choose life, not death. Don't do these immoral things, do these things, and there'll be blessing in your life. If people just added that as a layer to their lives, we could continue to have these sort of amazing conversations and build things around a very humble point of view, which is that I am a creature, I am not the creator. And the people who tend to step into those shoes that I am the creator, I am the God of my own universe, right? They are the dictators who bring the worst thing to society that have ever been seen. And
Absolutely.
so I love using it simply again as a suggestion. And I like to tell it to people as like, look at history, try and make a good claim. Even as a Jew, again, I want to see a biblical Israel. I don't want to see the Israel that we're seeing now. I,
Oh,
I'm not a fan. I'm
well,
not a fan of what's
and
going on. I'm not even
yeah,
a fan of Zionism. Like, are you telling me we could flip a coin and end up in Africa as opposed to Israel? What a joke.
right.
Theodore Herzl, the great atheist. Again, all these other guys who were even willing to perform terrorism in order to get the land.
Right.
If we've gotten the land and we had it, right? These are part of wars. I see a bigger picture, which is how, like, whether it was proper. Well, first of all, the foundation is that the world would want the Jews to have the land of Israel. That benefits everybody because we know of God because of this people. So we want to empower them, which will ultimately empower us.
Right.
But we don't want to empower people who don't follow the laws. And so at this point, we almost have like a Christian nation, which could call out the Jews like, hey, we're following the laws and you're not, and we're getting blessed and you're not. Why the hell would we want to fund you? Right.
Right.
But that's not the conversation being had. That's not the conversation being had at all. These people don't even believe in the Bible being literal at all, yet they take claims to the land. It's like, you guys are putting yourself in a pretty bad spot right now.
Yeah, just a
And
little
so,
hypocrisy
and
there.
And this is the thing is they have it. They have the land, and we are in a good position, God willing, to stop the war. I hope America steps in correctly. I hope the Israelites take step backs and make the appropriate, not only apologies, but they actually get consequences to where it should be for the things that they've done. And then people start to focus on the need of God and the commandments, and they can start to work together to become holy again.
Right. Oh,
You
amen.
know, I would love to see that. Well,
You,
Jodelle, sorry, what's that?
I said you and me both.
Yes, amen to that.
Mm.
I still have a bit of a work day ahead of me. I
Okay.
think this conversation has been awesome. I
I
wish you great success in everything that you're doing. It is a blessing to the world, and it brings me peace that you're out there doing this. And
thank you.
I'm sure this won't be the last time that we talk. I hope that there is some sort of connection here because ultimately we do have this awesome commonality and I'm looking for it and
Absolutely.
you already have it at a grander scale. So perhaps
Yeah.
there's some integration there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's keep the communication lines open. If I come across something, I'm going to start shooting things your way and bouncing things off of you. And that
I think
iron,
people are going to take away a lot from this conversation. It was really, really good.
it really, really was. Lots of ideas covered and hopefully a new perspective. What I appreciate is a perspective on Judaism that no one is willing to say out loud. So I thank you for saying it out loud.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Mhm.
Well, Jodelle, have a great week. God
You
bless.
too. You as
All
well.
right.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.